He's scarier than Lovecraft. Better than food, man. Good October afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Cliff Sargent. Great to see you as always. Got this cool new shirt. It's giving off this kind of ethereal glow in the video today, but you can pick one of those up in the description, at the link in the description box below if you're interested. And thanks a bunch. They come in several different colors, and I've seen one of them in yellow, and it looked like totally awesome, actually, which was unexpected. So yeah, you have a lot of options. Totally appropriate for the season. This is the perfect Halloween book for me. Unusual, I think, in that it's not as maybe dramatic or visceral or sort of over the top as things I would normally review around this time of year. It's a collection of ghost stories by a British author who I'd never heard of until this was sent to me, Robert Aickman. This was sent from Nicholas at NYRB Books, a fantastic guy, and NYRB is a phenomenal publisher. I love them. One of my absolute favorites. Chances are, if it's from NYRB, you've probably got something good. Thank you, Nicholas. I really appreciate it. I loved this book. Let's just get right to it. Robert Aickman feels like a cross between Alfred Hitchcock and H.P. Lovecraft. He falls into the category of weird fiction, but I feel that would lead you to believe his writing is sort of pulpy when really it's sophisticated. It's very literary. It's not genre horror fiction, which it seems that's where it gets shelved a lot. This is a collection of very British, strange stories, which is what he called them. Beneath all of the horror lies this black, ironic, very dry British humor. Aickman co-founded the Inland Waterways Association, which preserved and restored England's canal system. He was never a full-time writer. He sort of did this on the side, it seems. And as with a lot of the greats that we're discovering right now, all too late, unfortunately, for their benefit, his writing didn't seem to be it didn't do too well while he was alive. You know, he wasn't widely read, it seemed. I don't think there was much financial success. Ghost stories seem to run in Aickman's blood, though. Aickman was the grandson of Richard Marsh on his mother's side, who wrote an occult novel I haven't read called The Beetle, sort of a Victorian Gothic novel. And I think it came out around the same time as Dracula and did pretty well. So this is a collection of short stories. I won't go through them all, but I will discuss a few of my favorites. I'm going to tell you right off, he's not the most accessible author. It takes effort to get into Aickman. It takes a while. It's dry at first, often. Not all the time, but some of these stories, you'll know what I mean. There are parts of his stories that are even boring, but they'll end up haunting you. You have to trust me on this one. It's a journey, right? But it's worth it. Seriously worth it. To think of, how I felt in the beginning, the middle, and by the end of this book. I mean, it was really all over the place. There were parts, I think in the middle, I almost was just like, oh, I give up, I can't take it anymore. When I was reading Residents Only, there was just some descriptions of these committees that just got very, very, very dull, but then it picked back up again, and then you sort of admire the whole thing when it's all over. It doesn't give it all to you, and it doesn't just placate to your desire to be entertained all the time. It's really challenging at some points, but the payoff is magnificent. There is nobody like him. And how often do you come across such an original take on the ghost story? How often can you say, I just read this collection of ghost stories which was unlike anything else I've ever read in horror or, any subgenre of fiction, just fiction in general. This is unlike anybody else. Truly, truly, truly original. There you go. You may not be immediately scared, but may instead wake up a day or two later with the story on your mind, festering, poisoning your subconscious as you slept, unbeknownst to you, haunting you. I read that he was influenced by Freud and Dali. Psychoanalysis and surrealism has made its way into his process. The stories present the subtle at first, then gradually horrifying and surreal distortion of normal life, time, landscape, and relationships. Victoria Nelson, the editor, mentions this in the intro, as well as the idea that it's the omission of things in Aickman's stories that make them scarier than a whole story devoted to strange things. He's scarier in many ways than Lovecraft. Seriously. Now that's something to say. How do I put it? It's kind of like, it's a little like Lynch. Maybe it's a lot like Lynch, actually. He's a lot like David Lynch, the literary David Lynch. Although I think I just say everything is like David Lynch because David Lynch is so impossible to describe. But he doesn't wrap things up with an explanation, not even a supernatural one. It's about the collapse of human systems, the collapse of normal life, revealing the chaos of reality, or rather sort of chaos seeping into normal life and then kind of corroding it from the inside. And that sort of reminded me just now of Lynch's analogy about the white picket fences with the green grass lawns in the suburbs, but you look under there and there's all these festering ants, like that scene from Blue Velvet. That's why I say he's like David Lynch. Anyways, so my favorite short stories were the following. Compulsory Games, which the book is named after, about a man whose wife becomes friends with a lonely single woman who's a neighbor of theirs. Bit by bit, she spends more time with her, essentially abandoning her husband, unraveling his reality, seemingly cheerful and unworried while doing so, which gives the story this surreal, cruel tone. Like he's the only one who realizes what's happening, but he can't figure out what it is. He can't figure out why his life is falling apart and his wife doesn't love him anymore, and she seems like as happy as ever, but he's like gradually more and more miserable, and he doesn't understand what's happening. She's this woman, this neighbor, is sort of like a vampire. Like she's just taking everything he loves from him, and it's so demented. But it gets even more bizarre. And bizarre, absurd, these words, this sort of thing, the absurd. I think Python, Monty Python had a big influence on British culture. And I think that Aickman was sort of part of that whole thing in that, the absurd, it started to kind of creep into his work. Yeah, there's a little bit about that on this Aickman documentary on YouTube that I'll link to in the description box below. I think this filmmaker is talking about that. But I thought that was interesting. Anyways, okay, so this neighbor is stealing this guy's wife. And the two women decide to buy a plane. And then, by the end of the story, this husband is chased around by this pilotless plane, sort of like, he just hears the engine, and then like this thing is like circling and like following him, sort of like the crop duster scene in North by Northwest, and he has to kind of like run, and it's like nobody else seems to see it, right? But it's starting to become deafening, like it's very, very loud, it's very intrusive, and he's like terrified to go outside. And this plane is following him. He's stalked by this plane, and there doesn't seem to be a pilot. It's silly, but it's absurd and disturbing, especially when you have lines like this, which is from this story, Compulsory Games. But after life has begun to run away from us, nothing is ever again really credible, nor does it matter. And I read that a few mornings ago, and that just dropped like a bomb. The horrifying thing about normal life collapsing underneath you, that's Aickman's kind of horror. The collapse of meaning and structure and the systems that we all grasp onto for dear life. All of us, we all have to have some sort of way, method, container for understanding the world, right? Some sort of narrative of our lives. But what happens when that narrative is busted, when it's broken, when it's shattered? What happens when all of that collapses? And I think it happens to us at various points in our lives. Whether that's, a relationship, or, you lose your job, or your loved one dies, all kinds of stuff. Can you hear that? there's a plane outside. This morning there's some sort of event going on, and they had this plane that has one of those ads attached to it, and it's circling around, and that's what we woke up to today, were these helicopters and this plane that I could see. So I thought that was ironic. Wood, as in WOOD, is a deeply unsettling tale. It's about a man who has a friend who makes these little dolls out of wood that he sells at the post office. But anyways, this guy's friend marries the daughter of an undertaker. This daughter is also in the business. So this guy is asked to be the best man at his friend's wedding, which is sort of uneventful. It seems to be a small wedding, seems to be very fast. Later he learns that his friend is going into the undertaking business as well. And so, she gets pregnant and they move away. They move away and he loses track of them, only to find his way to the town and house they moved to years later, despite trying to avoid it. When he comes across their house, he spots them, or thinks he does. But then the wife goes back inside, and then, this guy, his car keeps breaking down, so he pulls over and it's raining, and the husband, his friend, comes over to him or something, but he has to pop up his hood and work on his car in his pouring rain, and then the husband disappears as well, and so he's like, oh, where'd they go? And he goes to find them at this house. It looks like it's been burnt, like black on the inside and broken windows, and he finds this wooden doll or puppet, this small child carved of wood, with a strange set of handwritten instructions. I'm going to read it to you. Instructions, after a kind, indeed they were, written out in ink, and with no punctuation by a hand to me unknown. I read them, and after a considerable pause, brought out my church's notebook from my jacket pocket and copied them down. Here is what I wrote. When the man is sawing wood, wait and watch for falling blood. Blood and sawdust are the same, in Dame Nature's little game. When the woman's blindly scraping, then's the hour for blows and raping. Within the earth without a sound, that's what makes the world go round. Whatever else you need to know, set the man and woman so. Let them prophesy forever, curse them once, and come back never. Dude. That's like the most phenomenally creepy thing I've ever read. I won't tell you what he finds after that. Now, what is striking about that poem, or that set of instructions there, is that the tone is so much more vicious than Aickman's other writings. So it's very believable as a found document because of the contrast, and therefore extremely disturbing in this context. It's a very similar atmosphere to British horror mysteries like The Wicker Man, which is my favorite horror film. I don't know if you would call it a horror film. It really walks the line. It is an absolutely magnificent film from what I remember. That is an incredible movie. The original Wicker Man, 1973, with Christopher Lee, and unbelievably good, great, brilliant film. But Possession too, that's also one of my favorites. Those two are really like hand in hand for me, for different reasons, but I both absolutely love those movies. That's tough to decide. But The Wicker Man has a similar atmosphere to this. The stiff British formality of the characters and the writing style allows for the absurd or bizarre events to contrast that much stronger. I loved Wood, and as for my favorite out of the bunch, it's a tie between that one and the very last story in the collection, which is Just a Song at Twilight. There's even one story, The Strangers, where this character is in an audience of people so stiff they resemble ghosts. They may be ghosts. Watching some sort of performance. And he sees something in this performance which causes him to want to escape immediately. Like, it's so disturbing, it makes him immediately decide to leave, to get away. But he doesn't even tell you what it is. And that's excellent. Again, it's the omission of things that makes Aickman's stories scary. I mean, genuinely scary. That's real horror. The unknown, or the communication of the authentic dread of the unknown. And he doesn't always employ that device, but in The Strangers, he did so perfectly. But even now, it's difficult for me to describe what makes a Robert Aickman story so creepy. It isn't just one thing, but his entire approach. His whole narrative architecture. He builds a seemingly normal environment, sometimes even dry or dull, something believable. But there will be a trajectory switch somewhere that gradually throws everything out of alignment. And by the time you finish the story, it isn't necessarily apparent where things went wrong. really, really wrong. He's smart, methodical, and in control. He shows restraint until precisely the right moments. There's nothing conclusive about the ghost stories of Robert Aickman. And sometimes it's more like the suggestion of a ghost story. We're not even sure of what happened or if there were ghosts or what. But his ability to conjure the inexplicable, unsettling mystery of human experience in his own unique style, the kind that will haunt you, that's the power of Robert Aickman. John Gray put it very eloquently in this article that I've linked to in the description box below. He said, "Dreading an illegible world, we make an imagined home from which the world has been banished. When inexplicable incidents befall us, the makeshift structure breaks down, and the narratives we fashion of our lives are broken. If Aickman's stories are strange, it is because they are, in fact, anti-stories, revelations of the plotless lives we actually lead. When we encounter the uncanny, our fancied home can no longer shelter us, and we are lost in the indecipherable shape-shifting reality it has been built to shut out." Man, that's very well done. All right, so who should read it? Fans of mysteries, gothic horror, Hitchcock, ominous, slow, cerebral films. Yes, those who enjoy Lovecraft, but Aickman is a much slower burn. If you like the tales of Edgar Allan Poe, absolutely. If you enjoyed that Baudelaire that I reviewed not too long ago, sure. I'd say he's for more patient readers. Much more quiet inner dread than apocalyptic cosmic horror. If you want to get in and get out, then go for Lovecraft. But if you want a slow intellectual build-up with a deeply satisfying structure that reveals itself in the end, but doesn't really quite give away the trick, a story where you not only say, "Oh my God," in horror, but also, "Wow, that's well done," go for Aickman. Aickman himself had this to say: "The successful ghost story does not close a door and leave inside it still another definition, a still further solution. On the contrary, it must open a door, preferably where no one had previously noticed a door to exist, and, at the end, leave it open, or possibly ajar. Better than food, without question." God, I love this book. Which one of you lucky patrons is going to get this one for the coffee lottery? For those of you who are new, the coffee lottery is where I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video, and I place them in this mason jar. And for each review I do, I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out, they're sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, this one right here in fact, plus a bag of delicious coffee roasted by yours truly. And if you would like to get in on that, you could head to the description box below and donate $5 or more per video. I sincerely appreciate it. And thank you very much to everyone who has supported the show, all the patrons, and good luck to you. Good luck to all of you. And happy Halloween, everyone. All right, here we go. Let's do it. Harith. Thanks a bunch, Harith. Really appreciate it. You'll be getting Compulsory Games by Robert Aickman and a bag of delicious coffee. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you're having a wonderful October. Please subscribe if you have not already. A like on Facebook would be great. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram. Always remember, and you can pick up a shirt below if you'd be so kind to support the show. All right. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you later. Ciao.